The road ran long and pale beneath the dying sun. A ribbon of dust laid careless across the land. It had no memory and no mercy. Wagons passed it. Horses wore it down. Men spilled their anger into it and rode on. By the time evening leaned its weight against the horizon, the road had already forgotten what it had seen that day. She lay just beyond its edge, half in the grass, half in the dirt, as though the earth itself had tried to pull her away from being noticed. One sleeve was torn clean through. Blood had dried dark along her temple and neck, stiffening her hair where it clung to her skin. Her breath came shallow, uneven, the kind that sounded unsure of its own permission to continue. Pain drifted in and out of her like an unwelcome tide. When it came sharp. When it went, it left behind a hollow where hope used to sit. She had stopped trying to remember how long she had been there. Time felt like something that belonged to other people now. The sky shifted colors above her, and she watched it without expectation, as if watching from a great distance inside herself. She had learned, over the years, how to become small, how to quiet her voice, how to carry hurt without spilling it into places where it might invite worse. The man who had left her here had not needed rage to do it. Indifference had been enough. A shove. A dismissal. The certainty that the road would finish what he had begun. He had never looked back, and somehow that was what hurt most of all. A fly landed on her knuckles. She did not move to shoo it away. Moving felt expensive. Survival felt like a fragile thing, balanced on whether the world would notice her or not. Hoofbeats came softly, almost swallowed by the wind. They were not the hurried kind, not the kind driven by fear or chase. They were steady, patient, belonging to someone who did not rush through his own life. The horse slowed before it stopped, sensing what the rider had not yet named. The man dismounted without urgency, dust puffing beneath his boots. He stood still for a moment, as if the land itself had asked him to listen. His clothes were worn but clean, his hat creased by years rather than fashion. There was no gun in his hand, no hero's posture in the set of his shoulders. Only a quiet alertness, the kind shaped by long days and longer nights. He saw her then, not as a problem to solve, not as a danger to measure, but as a person lying where no person should have been left. He did not speak right away. Words, he knew, could startle something already broken. Instead, he crouched a few steps away, careful to keep his shadow from falling across her face. He noticed the way her fingers twitched when the wind changed, the way her jaw tightened, as though she were bracing against a blow that never came. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and even, shaped to carry without pressing. He told her his name, not because she had asked, but because names reminded people they were still part of the living world. He told her she was not alone now. He told her she could rest. Her eyes opened halfway, gray-blue, clouded with pain and disbelief. She tried to pull back, but her body refused her that much obedience. Panic flickered, sharp and quick, and he saw it. "That's all right," he said, the words gentle as a hand held open. "I won't touch you unless you say." It took effort she barely had, but she nodded. Once. Small. He removed his coat and laid it over her shoulders, letting the weight settle slowly, as if the fabric itself were asking permission. The warmth made her gasp not from pain, but from the sudden, unfamiliar sensation of care. He lifted her with a steadiness that spoke of practice, not force. One arm under her knees, one behind her back, careful to keep her close enough to feel secure but not trapped. She was lighter than she should have been. That troubled him more than the blood. As he carried her, she felt the rhythm of his steps, the rise and fall of breath that did not hurry, did not falter. It grounded her in a way she could not explain. She closed her eyes, not because she had given up, but because for the first time in hours, she felt permitted to. The horse shifted patiently as he settled her across the saddle, wrapping her again in the coat, adjusting the reins so they would not brush her face. He walked beside them as they moved off, one hand resting lightly near her knee, there if she needed it, gone if she did not. Behind them, the road stretched on, unchanged, already forgetting. Ahead, the land darkened into evening, wide and quiet and waiting. She did not know where he was taking her. She only knew that for the first time since the day had broken her open, someone had seen her and chosen to stop. And sometimes, she would later learn, that choice was enough to keep a life from slipping away entirely. She woke to warmth before she woke to fear, and that alone felt unfamiliar. Light filtered through a thin curtain, pale and careful, resting on wooden walls that held the smell of smoke and old pine. The bed beneath her was narrow but clean. A quilt covered her to the shoulders, its stitching uneven, made by hands that had worked more for usefulness than beauty. For a moment, she did not remember how she had come here, and in that small forgetting, peace lived. Then her body spoke, and memory followed. Pain stirred, dulled but present, no longer screaming yet unwilling to leave. She drew a shallow breath and felt the pull along her ribs, the ache in her head. Her fingers tightened into the blanket as panic rose, swift and practiced. She scanned the room, measuring exits, shadows, listening for footsteps that might mean she had been mistaken about safety. A chair sat near the bed, a basin of water beside it, clean cloth folded with care. Nothing in the room suggested haste or harm. The door stood open just enough to let air move through, not closed like a trap, not wide like an invitation. The space felt considered. She tried to sit up and failed, a sharp reminder that strength was not something she could demand yet. The sound she made was small, but it carried. He appeared in the doorway almost at once, as if he had been waiting for permission. He stopped there, hand resting against the frame, giving her the distance she needed without leaving her alone. In the daylight, she saw him more clearly. Lines at the corners of his eyes, not unkind. A steadiness in his posture that did not belong to men who enjoyed control. He did not look surprised to see her awake, only relieved. "You're safe," he said, voice quiet, shaped carefully. "You're at my place. You took a hard knock, but the worst of it's behind you." She searched his face for expectation and found none. Her throat felt tight, unused to forming words for anyone who might listen. She managed a nod instead. He moved only when she watched him do it, lifting the basin, wringing the cloth. He explained each motion before it happened, as though narration itself were a kind of respect. When he dabbed at the dried blood along her hairline, his touch was light, brief, gone the moment her breathing changed. A neighbor came by later, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and a voice worn smooth by years of speaking gently to hard things. She brought soup and did not ask questions. She did not look at the bruises longer than needed. She spoke to her as if she were already well, already staying. The days that followed did not announce themselves. They arrived quietly, one after another, measured by the movement of sunlight across the floor and the changing weight of pain in her body. He checked on her without hovering, left food within reach, sat nearby sometimes, mending leather or sharpening tools, letting the sound of his work fill the space where pressure might have lived. She noticed things she had forgotten how to notice. The way he never stood between her and the door. The way he kept his voice low even when speaking to others. The way he never touched her without warning and never lingered when she seemed tired. These were not grand gestures. They were habits, and that made them matter more. When she spoke, it came in pieces. A word here. A sentence there. He accepted them as complete, never pushing for the rest. She told him she had nowhere to go. She did not tell him why. He did not ask. The town existed beyond the walls of the house, present in the way voices carried on the wind, in the way the neighbors' visits grew less frequent but more watchful. She felt it pressing in, the familiar weight of being measured, of being seen as something temporary, something suspect. Fear stirred again, not of him, but of the world that would eventually notice her here and decide what she deserved. One afternoon, as she stood at the window, strength slowly returning to her legs, she said she would leave once she could walk the road on her own. The words tasted like old habit, leaving before being asked. He paused in what he was doing, not to stop her, but to truly hear her. "You can," he said, "or you can stay until you're ready. There's no debt here." It unsettled her more than anger would have. She had learned how to survive demands. Permission was harder. That night, sleep came easier. The pain receded another inch. She dreamed not of the road, but of standing somewhere quiet, unafraid of the sound of her own footsteps. In the morning, she found herself helping, small tasks at first, chosen rather than assigned. Folding cloth, stirring a pot, sitting on the porch with a cup, warming her hands while the land stretched wide and unbothered before her. Each act stitched something torn back into place. When she caught her reflection in the window, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Bruised still, yes, but standing, breathing, present. The world had not changed its nature. She knew that. The road still waited. The town still watched. But within these walls, something steadier had begun, built not on rescue, but on restraint, on the quiet understanding that healing did not need to be hurried to be real. As the sun dipped low again and the house filled with the soft sounds of evening, she realized she was no longer counting the hours until she could leave. She was counting something else instead, though she did not yet have a name for it. Strength returned to her in quiet increments, not all at once, but enough to change the shape of her days. She rose earlier now, drawn by habit rather than pain, and found comfort in small routines that asked little and gave much. The kettle warming on the stove, the feel of wood beneath her palms as she wiped the table clean. Outside, the land moved at its own patient pace, unbothered by what had been broken and slowly mended within the house. He did not give her work. That mattered. What she did, she chose. Some mornings she fed the chickens, moving carefully among them, relearning how to trust her own presence. Other days she sat on the porch with a needle and thread, repairing things that did not need saving as much as she did. He accepted every contribution with the same quiet nod, never weighing her worth against her usefulness. They spoke more now, though still not much. Conversation came like weather, unforced and often about nothing of importance. The quality of the soil, the stubbornness of a fence post, the way the sky looked before rain. In these exchanges, she learned him by degrees. He had been alone a long time, chosen it, perhaps. Loss had taught him the shape of silence, and he had learned to live inside it without hardening. The town's presence grew harder to ignore. She felt it when she walked beside him into the yard and noticed a rider slow on the distant road. When the neighbor's kindness came with questions, she did not answer. When she sensed the careful watching that followed women who arrived without history and stayed without explanation, old fear stirred, familiar and sharp, telling her she would soon be asked to account for herself. One afternoon, a storm gathered without warning. The sky darkened early, clouds piling heavy and low. Thunder rolled across the land like something searching for a place to settle. The sound reached inside her, shaking loose memories she had kept pressed down. Her breath shortened. Her hands trembled, useless against the rising panic that did not care how far she had come. She retreated into the house, closing the door too quickly, the sound of it echoing louder than she meant. The walls felt smaller suddenly, the air thick. She slid down until she was seated on the floor, back against the wood, arms wrapped tight around herself. The storm outside broke open, rain striking the roof in uneven bursts, each clap of thunder pulling her deeper into the place she had sworn she would not return to. He came in quietly and stopped several steps away. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not reach for her. He lowered himself to the floor where she could see him, leaving space between them, making no move to cross it. He spoke to her then, not with comfort meant to fix, but with steadiness meant to anchor. He named what was real: the sound of rain, the strength of the walls, the fact that she was not alone. She focused on his voice, let it guide her breathing back into rhythm. When the worst of it passed, she stayed where she was, exhausted, emptied out. He remained too, present but unobtrusive, as if understanding that survival sometimes needed witnesses. After that night, something shifted. Not into romance, not into promises, but into a deeper alignment. She trusted him not because he had saved her, but because he had not tried to own the saving. She began to tell him more, careful truths offered without detail. That she had learned early how quickly safety could vanish. That she was tired of being strong in ways that hurt. He listened without interruption. When she finished, he did not answer with advice. He said only that she had done what she needed to in order to live, and that it had been enough. The town eventually found its voice. It always did. She heard it in the way the neighbor hesitated before speaking, in the way invitations were offered with conditions unspoken, the suggestion gently framed, that she might move on before questions grew less kind. She felt the old reflex stir, the instinct to leave before being pushed. She brought it to him at dusk, standing on the porch as the light thinned and the world softened. She told him what was being said, what was being implied. Her voice did not shake, but her hands did. He did not answer right away. He looked out across the land, familiar and unyielding, then back at her. "You get to decide," he said. "Not them." It was the simplest thing he could have said, and the hardest for her to accept. Choice had never been offered cleanly before. It had always come with cost. That night, she lay awake listening to the quiet of the house, to the steady sounds that had become her measure of peace. She thought of the road and what it had taken from her. She thought of the way this place had asked nothing in return for shelter. When morning came, she rose with a clarity she had not known in years. She told him she wanted to stay not because she needed protection, but because she had found something worth standing for. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He nodded, once, as if acknowledging a truth that had been waiting for her to claim it. Outside, the land held steady, and for the first time since she had been left beside the road, she felt herself doing the same. The reckoning did not arrive with gunfire or raised voices. It came the way most hard truths did, carried on the ordinary breath of the town. A visit disguised as concern, a question framed as advice, the unspoken demand that she explain herself, that she justify why she remained where she had been neither born nor claimed. She felt it the morning they rode up, two men from the town, hats in hand, faces set into careful expressions meant to appear reasonable. They did not look at her first. They looked at the house, at the land, at him. Ownership interested them more than people ever had. He did not step forward. He did not block the door. He stood where he always did, slightly to the side, leaving her visible, leaving her room to choose how she would be seen. That choice steadied her more than any defense could have. They spoke of rumors without naming them, of appearances, of how things might be misunderstood. One of them suggested gently that it might be best if she moved on soon, before stories took on sharper edges. The words were soft, but the meaning beneath them was old and heavy. She listened without interrupting, her posture straight, her hands loose at her sides. When they finished, silence settled, long enough that the men shifted their weight, unused to being left without immediate reply. She felt the familiar urge to shrink, to apologize for taking up space she had not been invited to occupy. It rose in her chest, sharp and practiced. She let it pass. "I was left on the road," she said, her voice even, neither accusing nor defensive. "I was brought here because someone chose not to let me die. I stayed because I was treated like a person. If that troubles you, it does not change what is true." The words surprised her with their calm. They surprised the men too. They had come prepared for denial or pleading, not for a statement that required no permission. One of them glanced at him then, perhaps expecting intervention. He said nothing. His silence was not absence. It was faith. They left soon after, the conversation unfinished in the way unfinished things often are when power slips quietly out of familiar hands. The dust from their horses hung in the air for a long moment after they were gone, then drifted away. She stood there, heart racing now that the moment had passed, the weight of it settling in. He turned to her then, finally meeting her eyes. There was no pride in his expression, no claim. Only something like recognition. "You did well," he said. The simplicity of it undid her more than praise ever could have. She nodded, swallowing the tightness in her throat, and together they went back inside. Time moved on, as it always does, indifferent but reliable. The town adjusted, slowly, not because it had been convinced, but because persistence has a way of wearing down resistance. She became a familiar figure, no longer a question mark, just another life unfolding in plain view. Some never softened. Enough did. She grew into the days. Her laughter returned in small, surprising bursts. Her hands grew sure again, her presence grounded. The house changed too, filled not with noise, but with warmth that lingered even when rooms were empty. They shared meals, shared work, shared long stretches of silence that no longer needed explaining. What they did not share was ownership. That boundary remained clear, honored by both. When closeness came, it came gently, earned through time rather than claimed through need. There was no moment that announced itself as the beginning. There were only accumulations. A hand offered without expectation. A look held without demand. Trust, built the way strong things are, from the inside out. Years later, the road still ran pale and patient beyond the land. It carried other stories now, other lives brushing briefly against it before moving on. Sometimes she stood at the edge of it and remembered who she had been there, broken and unseen. The memory no longer hurt. It reminded her how far she had come. In the evenings, they sat on the porch as the light softened the world into something kind. Their closeness needed no words. The land stretched before them, wide and unclaimed, and she felt herself belonged to it not because it had saved her, but because she had chosen to stay. If there was a lesson in her life, it was not loud enough to demand attention. It lived quietly, in the spaces between harm and healing. It said that survival is not the same as living, but it can be the path toward it. That kindness, when given without condition, has a way of changing not only those who receive it, but those who witness it too. And sometimes, when the world leaves someone by the side of the road, all it takes to alter the ending is one person who decides to stop, and another who finds the courage to stand again.